I wanted to start off today's conversation just getting general views on human resources as we see it in entrepreneurial firms. And Anand, I'm going to start with you first. Uh, as a venture capitalist and someone who funds ventures, how do you see human resources? What is the priority of human resources when you do a risk analysis of a business?
Right. So the first priority, you must have heard a lot of VCs say what's important, what do you look for in a company when you fund them, right? And we say team. And the first priority is the team there? Okay, how does the team bond together? Is the team incomplete? So the first priority will be to get the right people into the company. Second priority is, are they motivated enough? Are they committed enough? Will they perform the best? Will they take ownership of the task? So largely, in the first few years, it's about the team, keeping the team intact, motivated, committed, and making them perform. As you go along, and once the company moves from product stage to growth stage and expansion stage, you need to get more sophisticated about the HR practices, and that's where you try to hire your first professional, HR resource to build an organization. As a VC, we wouldn't insist that you start with all the policies in place and you start with everything, just go and, go meet somebody in ICICI and copy their procedures and manuals, right? Not that way. But, ideally, HR and sophistication in HR management should precede growth. In reality, of course, it's usually 6 months late. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Jar, you started with a business that was very, very small to begin with, and moved out. What motivated you to join a small business?
Basically, there were 3-4 reasons why I wanted to join Florista. One is the proximity of the location. Second, the flexibility that it provided being a small organization. Thirdly, the work culture and also the nature of the boss.
The nature of the
yes,
boss?
The nature of the boss, yes. In an organization, whether big or small, it really makes a difference when we have nice bosses to work with.
Of course.
What really motivated me was the growth factor. When we started the company, we had just one outlet. And we were a group of 10 employees. Right at the beginning, the focus was on growth, expansion, and growing into multiple outlets. So I knew that there is a lot of growth potential in the company, and that was the factor for which I wanted to join Florista.
Oh, thank you. So growth potential is what Jar says people join entrepreneurial ventures for. What is your experience? Why do people join entrepreneurial ventures?
Yeah, first of all, it feels so nice to be here. Anand was an investor in my company, and he said they looked at team, they looked at all those good things, so probably a testimony to some of the things which we did right. But before I really answer that, do you want to run those slides, if you have it here?
Yes. Well, we're going to run the slides
later. Okay.
in
So I think what we learned in terms of HR, in terms of people, etc., is that in the business, you are whom you hire, not what you do. When I say what you do is what would refer to the process, strategy, decision that you take, etc., etc. But who is about the guy who sits in the corner, the guy who runs your sales force, the guy who runs your product division. I think I learned it pretty late, but a good thing is I learned it. And it's very painful, to make those, to miss those vacations, which you rightfully deserve, to be stressful, to be spend so much time chasing hundreds of problems, fundamentally because you really don't have right people in place. I think that's what we really learned. And as we discussed, I think we'll talk about what are the mistakes we made and how we corrected it.
So I just wanted to start off with an introduction and a few questions. We have a few slides that we wanted to show you before we went on this discussion. So hopefully someone will start the slideshow.
I think it's auto run, is it there?
I think it's starting at the console. Yeah. It's on, Mohit? It's on.
Yeah, please try to read the cartoon strips. This is my favorite one.
Thank you. So this was put together by our panelists. So hopefully they'll answer some of our questions today. You know, coming back to you, Anand, when you advise your companies, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs here might want to know, from an investor perspective, again, what is it that you advise your companies for an HR perspective? What would you tell them about HR when they're starting off at the time of investment?
So first of all, you know, HR is not something you hire some college trainee and ask him or her to do. HR is the CEO. Okay? The CEO has to be the owner of the HR function in the company. Okay? That's very important, you know, and that's the key thing. You know, in the initial days, for example, we would expect the CEO to not just interview, but lead the recruitment of each of the new team members, you know, to set the culture right. And Mohit, you know, and I was an entrepreneur, and there was a time when almost every weekend, you know, for months together, I would spend my days interviewing and recruiting people, and the rest of the evenings I would be wooing people again, you know, meet them again and again, convince them to join you. And that's the CEO job. You know, nobody else will do it for you. You know, if there is something wrong in HR, the responsibility lies on the CEO. Okay? That's the key thing. And, you know, frankly, you know, there are lots of superhuman people out there. You know, you have one-man armies, you know, like Rambo, and who can execute a lot, right? But what we're looking for is somebody who can build a company to do a great business. You know, a great businessman and a great entrepreneur will do a lot of work himself, but you know what we look for is which guy can build a great company, which in turn will do great business. So that's the perspective.
Thank you. And as a CEO, what do you believe? What makes great HR happen?
Okay, so I think Anand, what Anand said is right. The responsibility is to hire right people and then retain them. It sounds very simple, but what I realize is that the culture is critical, and the culture starts from the CEO, the way CEO behaves and what he does in the company. For example, in Carvale, the company is a little more informal. I think we have a lot more freedom for the people and less structure and less policies, because we fundamentally believe that when the company gets started, there are 5 people in the company. Nobody tells them to come to office on time. Nobody says that office is 10 to 6. Office is 24 hours actually for those 5 people, the founding team. And there are hardly any rules. You don't say this is a travel policy, this is the leave policy. There's nothing like that. But when you hire 10 more people, and then you start saying, if you come by 10:30, you'll have a half day. And I don't understand why. Because you can actually hire people who are going to own the company very responsibly. You can hire people who would pick up the trash from the floor and who would also worry about their own growth. They will invest into their own growth. They will ask the right questions. You can do all of those things. Unfortunately, it's difficult. Such people are rare. We don't spend enough time in recruiting them. And even when we meet them, they don't join us because we don't pay the salaries proper, or we're not attractive enough for them to join, etc., etc. I think with all of those things, but what we realize is that let's retain a culture which is where people have more freedom, where people, especially like a web-based company, internet-based company, technology-oriented company, the ability to innovate and the ability to look at problems more creatively is very important. And innovations and creative would really thrive when you have freedom for the people, when they're allowed to look at things in their own way, not just through a structure, process, etc. So we paid a lot of attention to getting people in the company, but then allow them to do what they want to do. And therefore, at Carvale, the culture is, Anand could probably voice for it, but it's very, very open. For example, if you walk into the office, everybody sits on the same desk, almost. We don't talk to the people across the table. We said that this is not what we want to do. And you can actually become a VP in Carvale, sitting in any desk, wherever you sit today. and be there because everybody sits at the same desk. It doesn't matter. So I think my responsibility is actually to say what kind of values we want to bring in the system, bring in the company.
Like to point out that Mohit doesn't have a separate cabin. He leads the largest car portal in the country, has multinational investors, and his office looks the same as any of his employees. Just a desk like everybody else.
It's just on the corner.
Yeah. There is a privilege, of course. Yeah. So, and just to take the corollary, I was once talking to somebody, a very great CEO, ex-Hindustan Lever, was hired by a businessman to run a publishing company. This guy goes there and really turns the company around, makes it profitable. The revenues go by 3 times in 2 years. And, one fine day, and this fellow left the job, he was telling me, one fine day I was just 2 hours late. And the owner who always felt that I'm overpaying this guy, probably the salary 10 years ago was 25 lakh rupees, which was a lot of money. Just for being 2 hours late, the CEO of the company, not the owner, of course, was sent a half-day leave voucher by the owner's peon. It was such a bad impression. That guy left probably in a week or 2. So, I mean, we have to understand the policies. Yeah, it's good to have policies, right? It's good to set examples. But much more important is empathy.
Yeah, I think, when I consult with a lot of entrepreneurial setup, everybody talks about flexibility, right? I had experience where the reverse worked as well, where an individual said, I'm leaving, and at his exit interview at the entrepreneurial setup, he said, my big problem is that it's all too fluid. And, while he had come from a slightly more structured setup, he said, I like the policies and I like the structure. This thing, come in when you want, do the way you want, doesn't work for me. I'd like someone to actually mentor me, tell me where I'm going wrong so I can keep developing. This is too much of my own initiative. I'm not ready to become an entrepreneur yet. So do you feel that way, Jer, sometimes that it's too fluid, or do you enjoy the flexibility?
Yes, in a small setup, when the number of employees are not really too many, in that sort of a setup, flexibility, would be enjoyed. But then as the company grows and number of employees increase, this flexibility kind of brings in the leniency amongst the employees. Now, this leniency also could be not only bad for the company, but amongst the employees also. Like, for example, if I were to come late on a regular basis, and it is not even noticed, I'm not even marked late.
Right.
And the other employees in such kind of situation might feel that the boss is being partial towards me. So what happens is that this kind of a leniency also brings about a rift between the employees.
That is absolutely true.
So that is where I feel that with flexibility and leniency, there has to be certain HR norms which has to be implemented, not only to bring in some discipline in the organization, but at the same time also to have a level of equality amongst the employees.
Absolutely.
The thing is that you should not be taking advantage, or disadvantage of that freedom which is given to you.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think norms and policies or processes need to be brought in, and it has to be, you have to strike the right sort of balance. But when, in your view, is a good time to do that? You've grown from, 5 people to 140 people. When was it a good time for you to bring in that balance?
180 now.
180, okay, I'm sorry.
I think, one, in India, it takes a little longer to figure out the business model. So by the time you set up a process, the business model starts changing, in fact. So anyways, I think I've seen the company changing a lot from 5 people to 30. It's become a very different company when you get 30 people. From 30 to 60 is a nightmare. 60, when we were 60 or 80 people, and when we become 150, it's very, very different. So today when I look back and we say there are certain models, certain businesses where we have very good understanding of the metrics. We understand what it take to close an order, what does it take to deliver it, and we understand the whole cycle. We understand the cost economics. And there we can actually put more process at. But there are businesses, there are experiments, there are innovations where we really don't want to go and put a process. We want to put a process in terms of thought structure. We want to put a process in terms of how will we review the business. We want to put a process in terms of how will we have a meeting, how will we discuss about the problem. Not in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the steps to really go and do it. I think one thing I'll say about the flexibility versus process is that we invest some time and effort to understand what kind of company we are. And how we did it is that we sat down in a room with 10, 15 people and said that, you know, what is it that is common between us? What is it that if we leave this company today and start another company, those things will still stay with us? And we understood a few things. We understood that, you know, one thing is we want to treat everyone with respect. Whether you perform, whether you don't perform, whether you come late, you come on time, whether you're a peon, you're a CEO, we want to treat people well. We want to treat you with respect. And if you don't treat other guy with respect, we feel uncomfortable. We said, that's how we are. Second thing, we realized that we are like, we're very agile, we are very experimentative, we are very innovative. We want to stay like that. If you come from a very structured background, if you come from that, I need to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the time, we said, no, we are guys who work with ambiguity at times. So with knowing all those things, and we understood a few more things, help us recruit people when we go and interview them. After we've done the interview, we tell them, this is how we are. Do you think it fits between us? Does the chemistry really, you think it work out? And then we also understand and assess whether those guys have the same values. Right. If they don't have, it's a very short-term thing. And
So talking about hiring, Anand, when you look at investing in a venture, what are the criteria that you look at for the entrepreneur from a human perspective?
What you looked in me.
Absolutely, no. So an A-class boss will hire people who are A+, right? And a B boss will hire C's and D's, you know, because he's full of insecurity. Now, one example is the entrepreneur willing to pay his second in command more salary than he himself draws, okay? Or maybe multiple people. And you know, this for introspection, how many of you would even think of paying much lower salary to yourself compared to your employees, you know? And we have Mohit here, wonderful. You know, so we have Mohit here, and Mohit, there was a time when Mohit used to draw half of his of his highest paid employee. And we as investors had a separate discussion with Mohit going on. But frankly, that never deterred Mohit from hiring the best people for his company. Okay? Of course, you know, another challenge which happens in terms of startups is that you cannot go by, you know, what's the job definition, right? If most of us, I mean, when I started my company in education, I was working in ICICI, I was in the treasury, just right above this floor, and I had no idea about what the world looks besides those windows. That's where I used to sit, right? No clue at all. But I went out and I started an education company, right? And what that told me was that if I can do it, right, I don't need to hire the most expensive people. I don't need to hire the right fit, and for my sales head doesn't have to be somebody with 20 years of experience and having sold the same industry. I'll get somebody like me, you know, and I'll groom them. Okay? I'll empower them, and I'll have belief, and they'll learn the same way I'm learning to run this company. So yeah, you have to be flexible, you know, and at the same time, you know, there will be a lot of stuff that you'll have to do to get the right talent. You know? Ultimately, the company is defined, you know, the company which I founded first, and Mohit's company, you know, you go to Carvale, and when we sold the company, out of the 4 or 5 guys who led the company's exit from the front, you know, and in attracting a German buyer, out of them, Mohit was the only one who was interacting with the company, right? I mean, all the others were employees of the company, and they were at the front. So that's the team you have to build.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Jar, when you got recruited and when you recruit people for yourself, how do you select your team?
Basically, since I head call center operations, the few criteria that we look in, one is, of course, how the person is able to speak fluently or not. That would be the basic criteria. But besides that, you know, we don't really look in for qualifications as such, you know, because we are still not very, very rigid, as in, you know, that we would require a particular qualified person. So for recruitment, you know, there are times when urgently we require somebody. And there are some times that, you know, we also go wrong in our decisions that we make. Because when we require somebody on an urgent basis, we would just recruit anybody. And when we realize that, you know, it's a mistake that we have done, we try and try to, you know, I mean, change the particular employees, the way that particular employee is performing in the organization.
Sure, sure. So it's about if trying not to make a recruiting mistake, but if
Right.
you have, then how do you sort of rectify it? And a lot of times it's very hard, especially in a smaller setup. You've hired someone, you've taken as many precautions as you possibly could, you finally found a person and you said, okay, fine, let's just go for it. I had a client once where he was a young entrepreneur from the IIM, and he said, you know, I need to get very well qualified people. Qualification was big for him. And he insisted that we bring in people who had the right sort of qualifications and the background and came from companies, so understood large vision and so on and so forth. The first couple of people that he took on, while they had all the right qualifications, all the right sort of background in terms of the companies and so on, they just did not fit in. That whole thing of picking up the trash from the floor to working in an unstructured way, working and, you know, trying to get your own photocopying done was just not happening. You know, the toss-up was, do we get rid of these people or do we try and convert them and see what to do with them? And how do we give them the time to adjust to a very new, fluid scenario? Do you have any experiences of that kind?
Yeah, so we had a vice president, and he was a really rock performer, like a star performer. He did very well. I was away from the company for almost 5-6 months because my son was not well, and we spent more time in the hospital than in the office. And I came back from it, and I realized that the certain thing in the company are not in place. He is cracking lots of non-parliamentary jokes and things like that. And that's not how we are. And people are uncomfortable. But nobody's getting up to him and telling him to shut up and say, this is not what's going to work here. And he was really rock star. He was driving the company's revenue. Everything was dependent on him. And I sat down and I had a talk with him. I was really scared, to be honest, but somehow I gathered the guts. And I sat down with him and told him that this is not what we want, this is not how we are, etc. It didn't really improve significantly after that. And another 1 month, and I actually sat down and say, hey, I think you better leave because I'll figure out how to run the business and revenue. But I think there was a chemistry mismatch completely, and we couldn't really tolerate that. So, and there are so many instances. I'm yet to meet a person who could answer this question in yes when I ask them, did you ever fire somebody too late? We always fire too late. We always take too much time making decisions, and I mean, we always take too late. I think one more thing, I'm sorry. Anand talked about A player, B player, and C player. And I always thought about who is that A player is, and how do you define that A player? And I read a wonderful book called Who, W-H-O, Who. And the guy who wrote the book is G.H. Smart. Amazing book. And he defines A player as somebody who got 90% chances of delivering on a KRA, which only 10% people can actually deliver. So he's among those 10% candidates who will meet at 90% of the time. And that's an amazing definition, actually. And we really looked at a KRA before we hired, saying that who could really meet it up to 90%. And so today, before we hire, we have a KRA ready, actually. We go and show the guy, this is what your KRA is going to be. That helps big time.
That is absolutely correct. As a recruiter, I think it's very easy sometimes to tell a client and an entrepreneur, why don't you just go ahead and hire him if he's willing to join you? Because sometimes just that much becomes a qualification for a small company. But it's important to have some definition of the job and the role. It's important to know what this person's going to be doing and really try and map that at the beginning. Otherwise, like he said, it's sometimes too late to even fire people and you have a chaos. What